There'll be tears. There'll be so many tears. Because this has been the hardest decision I've ever had to make. It really has. I've never taken this job for granted, ever. Not once. And the fact that you watch us at home or you watch us online, wherever you are, all over the world, the fact that we get to try and entertain you and spend time with you is an absolute...
What's the truth? What went wrong between you and Matt?
We never fell out. There was never...
I want it to be part of the Emoji Movie because No, seriously, go on.
Okay.
No, go on. And we can all see you dying right now. Let's go. Night after night after... Harvey Weinstein has already asked tonight up to his hotel to give him a massage.
Wagwan homies, and welcome to the channel. It's a hefty topic this one, and I don't mean in terms of mass, but nonetheless, I hope you enjoy your stay. So, talk show hosts, a relatively new form of employment and enjoyment, only birthing its initial blast of popularity under a century ago. And since then, it's certainly been a rocky road to say the least. We begin this story before the age of the internet, with less pressure upon hosts to chase trends and farm views or watch time from sites like YouTube, leading to a far easier time in connecting with the authentic and charismatic people on the screen, as well as facilitating a reaction from the audience who are happy on a level that goes deeper than just being around a celebrity. The topic of talk show is largely irrelevant, however, for the first part of the tragic James journey, though we won't dwell on the backstory unnecessarily, as all we really want to know about is the bitter fall of a talk show titan, because if there's one thing that people love to see, it's a champion losing, someone who's doing so well get knocked down a peg, or 2, or 3, or 10 pegs. As we flash back to 1996, where a little-known, short, chubby, and lovable funster made his debut on television, and a truly treacherous and bumpy journey began. That man, of course, was James Corden, who began his journey to celebrity like many, as a low-level actor. But unlike most, this one had a big break. And it came in the form of the critically acclaimed British sitcom Gavin and Stacey, whose pilot episode aired in 2007 and whose quality genuinely shouldn't be understated. Don't let Corden's partial involvement blind you, because this show was so great that at one point in time, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to label James as somewhat of a national hero. As we all know, however, this was soon to change. The success was short-lived because one of Corden's next television ventures was just as bad as Gavin and Stacey was good, as the chubby funster blasted the scene with Horn and Corden, an absolute travesty, signifying the beginning of the end of Corden's reputation. So for the majority of this video, we're going to be covering what I believe to be the most appropriate answers to the pivotal question, why, just why, do we hate James Corden so much? Even if we put aside the aforementioned Horn and Corden, it seems as though James has a habitual habit of partaking in the most bottom-of-the-barrel media the world has ever seen.
And they go through endless apps and worlds. They go through, you know, your junk mail and your trash mail, and they have to deal with Now, as an actor, there is nothing wrong with starring in a lackluster film every now and then, and it's somewhat an inevitability in the industry. An immediate example being Chiwetel Ejiofor, who boasts such incredible achievements in films like Armistead, 12 Years a Slave, and Serenity, but also some incredibly terrible performances in equally terrible films, most notably Sherlock Gnomes and The Lion King 2019.
You deliberately disobeyed me.
A bad film isn't something to hold against an actor, even if the acting itself is underwhelming, partially due to the importance of direction and instruction from higher-ups who command said actors in their films. In the case of James Corden, people are more likely to use these duds against him for two main reasons. The first and most unfair of which is due to the already heavy stigma and dislike surrounding him. However, the more reasonable one is the consistency of which these sloppy roles are played.
And that's why I think people will enjoy watching it, because
James Corden seems to have the same problem The Rock does, where he seemingly accepts every role put in front of him. This is likely to lead to assumptions of greed and gluttony, as well as implying a lack of integrity. To name a few of these leading roles, we have the Peter Rabbit franchise, the Emoji Movie, the Trolls franchise, Cinderella, and the most wince-worthy, Cats.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do I regret doing Cats? Well, here's the thing. I had the loveliest time making that film.
Okay.
It took me 6 days.
Right.
And I loved every single second of it.
Wow.
So I think you've got to be careful not to decide, you've got to decide things on your own personal experience.
Right.
And I had a really great time.
Yeah.
So I don't regret doing it at all because I decided to do it in the same way that I've decided to do many things. Some have worked and some haven't.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put it at a solid 5.
Wow.
4.5.
What James says in this clip is a tactic notoriously used by creators in the film industry when they know that they've played a part in a universally hated flop, as it's universally accepted by the most reasonable of critics that all that matters in a film is that its creators enjoy the final product. This is an idea that I personally am a firm believer in. It's this ideology that leads to the excessive respect Adam Sandler receives by the public, despite how shit his films tend to be. The fact that he loves them is certainly something to be admired and respected. What James admits by omission in this clip is that whilst he enjoyed the filming of Cats, which I'm sure he did, he acknowledges that the quality of the film is extremely low. Either that or he's too embarrassed to say that he enjoys it in a world that despises it, which is certainly possible, because as we'll see later, James Corden is obsessed with pandering to the public eye. It also doesn't help that not only does he star in terrible movies, but his performances have never gone past serviceable. Even in Gavin and Stacey, which was his best work, but one in which his acting is certainly nothing to write home about. To put it simply, Corden can't act, and he accepts film roles regardless of quality, focusing purely on the monetary aspects of his career, despite his already incredible affluence.
I want to speak to James here. It's James, isn't it?
For those unfamiliar with this conflict, there was a moment during a Glamour Awards Women of the Year presentation where Sir Patrick Stewart and James Corden got into something of a verbal skirmish. It begins by Stewart chastising Corden for seeming uninterested on screen at the show.
When the presenters are up here and when the recipients are receiving their awards, don't stand at the back of the stage with your hands in your pockets, looking around as though you wished you were anywhere but here.
And Corden fires back by critiquing his presenting style.
But when you come up and present an award, just get on with it. There we go.
Sir Patrick Stewart goes on to insult James Corden's weight, and Corden simply acknowledges that Stewart is kind of being an asshole.
From where I was sitting, I can see your belly. And that was right over there at the back of the room. These people down here, you know.
Sorry, I'm waiting for the punchline. Go on. No, seriously, go on.
Okay.
No, go on. You can see my belly, and we can all see you dying right now. Let's go for it. Here we go.
The feud ends with him saying to Stewart off mic, "You fucked up," and "don't say anything." Now I have to say, James Corden has received far too much unnecessary hatred from the British audience for this mini-conflict. Sir Patrick Stewart is simply too much of a national hero, whereas James Corden is not. The issue with this is that when two reputations of such differing status clash, the general public is likely to side with the more likeable figure, and whilst Corden was slightly more aggressive than desired, his leaning forward towards the elderly man was unnecessary, but his anger is far from unprecedented. The fact is, Stewart was being mean and confrontational for no reason, and to be frank, he comes across as a cringeworthy out-of-touch old man who knows no other insult than, "You're fat, haha."
One more? Do you want one more? If you fancy the Jonas Brothers, cover your belly.
Me and Corden admittedly had very similar reactions to this awful line. I understand that it's trendy to rag on big James Corden, but can we not let it cloud our views in instances like these? And I'm also not claiming that Corden's reputation is totally unfounded, as I'll now move on to an issue where he is genuinely shown to be problematic. Edgy jokes. There is undoubtedly a time and a place for them, especially in a world where genuine dark humour has been increasing in rarity. Basing comedy off of contentious and controversial, potentially damaging subjects is a very difficult task to pull off, which explains why people who lack the facilities to do so often avoid making these jokes. It's generally accepted that the more contentious the subject matter is, the better the joke needs to be, And even so, there needs to be some respect shown towards the subject matter. Rule of thumb is that you should purely be attacking the perpetrator rather than the victim. In 2017, producer Harvey Weinstein was exposed for using his power and influence in the industry to gain sexual gratification from various women. Merely days later, our buddy old pal decided it would be a good idea to make some jokes regarding the situation. The joke goes as follows.
Right here in LA, it's so beautiful. Harvey Weinstein has already asked tonight up to his hotel to give him a massage.
Now this was an incredibly stupid routine to perform. Firstly, the recency of the expose contributes to how grossly insensitive the joke came across as, and it's clear that Corden never considered how his words would affect those who were genuine victims of Weinstein, or even to sexual abuse in general. And even if he did consider these feelings, then it just goes to show how truly out of touch he is to think that this was an appropriate thing to say. Further issues from the joke arise from how unclear the target is. And whilst I'm sure James Corden didn't intend on insulting Harvey's victims, it can sometimes come across as such.
I don't know whether that groan was that you like that joke or you don't like that joke. If you don't like that joke, you should probably leave now.
This might be the worst part. The doubling down on a statement that Corden still seems to believe in despite the immediate negative reception. Any sane person would stop in their tracks after the sea of groans that approached them, unless they were so stage-struck that their mind disallowed them from going off script, which Corden clearly wasn't. He is acting totally and completely consciously. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he honestly thinks that he's doing a good job. This was his opener. This was how he wanted to introduce himself to the crowd, and his insinuation that the crowd should leave provided they harbour a disapproval of the joke is similarly offensive, as Corden accuses the audience of being the problem rather than him himself.
It has been weird this week though, hasn't it? Watching Harvey Weinstein in hot water. Ask any of the women who watched him take a bath. It's weird watching Harvey Weinstein in hot water. Harvey Weinstein wanted to come tonight, but he'll settle for whatever potted plant is closest.
This is where the target of Corden's words is unclear, as this can easily be taken as a ridiculing of Weinstein's victims. There is no insinuation that these women were manipulated, and for those who are unaware of the situation, they'd think that these women were willingly watching Weinstein in this scenario. I'll finish by comparing it with a similar joke made by Ricky Gervais during the Golden Globes.
Our next presenter starred in Netflix's Bird Box, a movie where people survive by acting like they don't see a thing. Sort of like working for Harvey Weinstein. You did it. I didn't. You did it. Shut the fuck up.
To state the obvious first, not only was this years later, obviously lessening the potency of the joke, but it's also told by someone who people know and love already. Nobody was shocked by this joke being made, as Ricky has a reputation for having a very limited filter during these appearances. Whereas Corden is nationally hated and portrays himself as a wholesome teddy bear much like Ellen did. The most important difference, however, is that the target of Gervais's joke is far more clear. Anyone familiar with this channel knows that I don't even particularly like Mr. Gervais, but anyone can tell that a lot more reasonable thought was put behind this joke than Corden's, and so it was far more respectful towards Weinstein's victims and harsh towards Weinstein and those who dismissed his actions. In Corden's apology, he stresses that he was indeed only attempting to insult the perpetrator himself. To be clear, sexual assault is no laughing matter. I was not trying to make light of Harvey's inexcusable behaviour, but to shame him, the abuser, not his victims. I'm truly sorry for anyone offended, that was never my intention. Seemingly like every celebrity apology, what Corden actually does here is not take any responsibility and make the claim that it's the audience's fault for taking the joke wrong. It's not a difficult apology to make, yet he couldn't even lie to save face. The running trend here is just how out of touch he is. All he had to do was mention that he maybe possibly should have either not told the joke or reworked how he presented it, rather opting for the sorry you felt that way apology, the most condescending and insulting kind. To put it simply, James Corden's confidence far outweighs his ability.
Hello everyone, I know what you're thinking. You're like, oh look, Andy Richter's got his own show. Welcome to the Late Late Show, everybody. Corden's
involvement in late-night television is without a doubt the biggest contributor to his international hatred. To be specific, it's his blatant, self-indulgent and self-important, arrogant attitude that fails to resonate with audiences, especially those who are slightly more cynical. He is particularly unpopular in the UK, who really don't want him back anytime soon. He's one of the few people of English backgrounds with far more dedicated American fan bases. Not only is this due to The Late Late Show being an American form of entertainment filmed in sunny Los Angeles, but James Corden also boasts an abnormally American personality, one that would have been bullied out of most English children by year 7. What I mean by this is his loudness, extroversion, and arrogance. He's too friendly and artificial. His comedy is usually centered around him screaming or being fat and funny, and the screaming in particular is a very frowned upon form of humour in the UK, who are renowned for being far more subtle in their approach to comedy. There is simply no wit or charm to Corden's late show approach, and as we previously established, he lacks the necessary skills in comedy to initiate a satisfying viewing. One example of Corden's shortcomings can be seen via the form of his notoriously annoying carpool karaoke. Right off the bat, he's often made fun of for not actually driving the car and just being towed around, and whilst this admittedly doesn't do much for his attempt at a relatable persona, fundamentally there shouldn't really be an issue with this, and realistically there'd be a bigger problem if he actually was driving. To be frank, what I've noticed when preparing for this video is that a lot of the biggest criticisms toward Mr. Corden are reaches, and having viewed virtually every anti-Corden video on YouTube, I can confidently say that the majority accuse Corden of pandering to the masses and being excessively personic, whilst ironically pandering to the overwhelmingly Corden-hating YouTube audience. Most of what I said in this video thus far has been skewed negatively towards the guy, but not only have I defended him where I see it as appropriate, but the majority of the criticism can be boiled down to a one-word description of the big man. That word simply being annoying. Not evil, not malicious, not withholding horrendously ill intent, but just being an annoying twat. Being overexposed, inescapable. There is not a doubt in my mind that if James Corden wasn't as shoved in our faces, but still produced the exact same content, a significant number of people would see him as inoffensive and uninteresting at worst. Can we all just stop lying to ourselves and admit that the reason we don't like James Corden isn't because of his fallout with Horn or Stewart, it's not because of the Harvey Weinstein jokes, it's not because he's a terrible actor. The fact is that the biggest, most primary justification for the national vicious hatred towards everybody's least favourite talk show host is simply that he comes across as a silly, annoying twat.